Lowe's knows Sundays are for football, so tackle your home improvement projects by Saturday and earn your Sunday with great deals on LG and Bosch appliances, select Bounty and Swiffer cleaning products, and more. Then once your to-do list is done, get ready to kick back, relax, and enjoy the game. Shop in-store or online now and earn your Sunday with help from Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
Get almost anything you need delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get a chicken parm delivered. A little escape? No. A delicious bowl of grapes? Yes, that. An afternoon stroll? Sorry, no. A burrito bowl? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now.
This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 1051 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, thanks for tuning in. I won't bore you with anything to open up today's show. It's a super important time of year, trade deadlines are about to hit, and we've got to get these rosters ready for the fantasy playoffs. So let's talk 15 transactions for Week 11. Add Luther Burden. Olamide Zaccheaus has run ahead of Luther Burden for most of the season, despite the fact that he's dead last on the team by a wide margin in yards per route run. Luther Burden, according to Next Gen Stats, he's gaining a full yard of separation per target over Zaccheaus this year. His yak over expected profile is better too. Burden's a young, explosive wide receiver who scored really well in the Zap model. I really hope the Bears start to give him more work, and they might, because DJ Moore suffered a shoulder injury on Sunday against the Giants. In turn, Burden had his highest route share of the season, which was 49%. That's still not high enough. There's no doubt about that, but it's moving in the right direction. Burden ended up catching all three of his targets for 51 yards. If DJ Moore were to miss some time, Burden would get more run in that offense. There's no doubt. But even if he doesn't, both data and the eye test suggest that Burden should be playing more than Olamide Zaccheaus right now. Burden's the right type of player to have on your bench this time of year. Buy Lamar Jackson. Understandably, the fantasy football world, they're going to tell you to buy Derrick Henry this week. He hasn't scored a touchdown in a couple of games, and he was vultured by Justice Hill in Week 10. That touchdown, that came on a hurry-up play. Hill just happened to be the running back that was on the field at that time. So if you can truly buy low on Derrick Henry, that's not a bad idea. You can go for it. Just don't forget about Lamar Jackson. Jackson hasn't done his typical insane things since returning from his injury a couple of weeks ago. He's averages 25 rushing yards per game over his last two, which are 2 games after that injury. Before the hamstring injury, he was averaging 41.5 rushing yards per game. But think about this for a second. Did we really expect him to run that much coming off the injury in Week 9? He was just getting up to speed. And then this past week, he faced a reasonable Minnesota front. And he also rushed for 36 yards. He just only found the end zone once through the air. Baltimore's rest of season quarterback schedule, it's arguably the best one in fantasy football. A matchup against Cleveland this week, it's not great. So you could always wait on this transaction if you want. But then they get the Jets, Bengals, Steelers, Bengals again, Patriots, and Packers to end the fantasy season. The only team that really scares me there maybe is Pittsburgh. Maybe. But that's only because the Steelers have played Jackson well in the past. And that game doesn't come in the fantasy playoffs either. If the Jackson manager in your league's feeling a little bit iffy after that QB2 outing in Week 10, maybe you can get him at a nice price. Add Alec Pierce. So I shouted out Alec Pierce on a couple of episodes last week. The 10 Trends episode talked about him. The Sleeper Show talked about him. And because of that, I probably just should have talked about him on the 15 Transaction Show. After his Week 10 performance, though, he definitely deserves a shout. Pierce now has 35 targets over the last 4 weeks. Michael Pittman, a player that everyone should like in fantasy football, is at 32 during that same stretch. Pierce is averaging almost 15 PPR points per game over these 4 games. Now the Colts are on bye this week, and then out of that bye, they have 2 rough matchups against the Chiefs and the Texans. But after that, things do open up a little bit more. And with Pierce on bye, maybe he's a little bit cheaper than he otherwise would be. Sell Marvin Harrison Jr. So like I talked about on last week's mailbag episode, this move to Jacoby Brissett for Arizona, it's a really good thing for Marvin Harrison Jr. overall. And we've seen that over the last couple of games. Harrison Jr. has hit target shares of 34.5% and 27.3%. Those are the two best target shares of his entire season. He scored 22.6 and 14.3 PPR points over those two games. Now, with all that being said, it was a little bit alarming to see Marvin Harrison Jr. catch just 3 of 12 targets on Sunday. And we can't forget that he did play against the Packers with Jacoby Brissett the week prior to this 2-game stretch. He had an 18% target share in that game and 7.8 PPR points. Harrison Jr. has now scored in back-to-back games. One of those games, like I talked about last week, was against the best opponent for perimeter wide receivers in the NFL. Moving forward, specifically in the fantasy playoffs, his opponents are not going to be nearly as bad. In Week 15, the Cardinals get the Texans. That's a bottom matchup for wide receivers. In Week 16, it's Atlanta. That's a team that's been generally good at stopping the pass. And then in Week 17, it's Cincinnati. As good of a matchup as the Bengals are, they've been okay against top wide receivers because of cornerback DJ Turner. So if you have Marvin Harrison Jr. and you're eyeing the playoffs, this could be a chance to sell high. Only if you can truly sell high. Buy Trey Benson. Now, I've alluded to Benson being a buy candidate on this podcast over the last couple of weeks. Let's just make it official. We still don't know exactly when he's going to be back and on the field. But he suffered that knee injury back in week 4, and the original timetable was that he was going to be back in 4 to 6 weeks. We're basically there now. And it comes at a good time. Bam Knight suffered an ankle injury in week 10 against the Seahawks. That backfield, it's Amari DiMercado and Michael Carter right now. Which, by the way, if Trey Benson doesn't go this weekend, those running backs, not bad ads off the waiver wire. But look, in that game where Trey Benson was hurt, he had a 73% running back rush share and a 12.5% target share. Those are really good peripherals. Let's just say that he comes back and he sees that kind of workload. In weeks 16 and 17, the Cardinals get the Falcons and the Bengals. Atlanta's slowly become a top 10 matchup for running backs by adjusted fantasy points allowed. Cincinnati is the best matchup, and that's during championship week. So if you're planning ahead and you want to have a player who has a shot to rise dramatically from a value perspective, even if his current situation is up in the air, I think Benson could be your guy. Add Tyler Algier. Bijan Robinson has not scored a rushing touchdown since week 6. Tyler Algier has 3 of them. As I said in the newsletter this week, the Falcons seriously just hate us. That's the only explanation. But realistically, what's going on here is that Algier has 5 carries within the opponent's 10-yard line during this time frame. Bijan Robinson has 1. Now, clearly, Algier is not going to be an easy player to trust week in and week out. But the Falcons, over their next 3 games, they get the Panthers, Saints, and Jets. Those each have the potential for favorable run-heavy game scripts. So at the very least, if you get Algier, you're handcuffing one of the best running backs in fantasy football. But there is some potential that he could find your flex. Add Sean Tucker. Bucky Irving's now been out since week 4. The Bucs have played 5 games without Irving. During the first 3 of those 5 games, Sean Tucker maxed out at a 22% snap share. His running back rush share never got higher than 26%. But over his last 2 games, he's hit snap shares of 34% and 33%. He's had running back rush shares of 41% and 47%. He's averaging over 10 carries per game over his last 2. Now, Todd Bowles on Monday, he said that Bucky Irving still doesn't have a timetable to return. That means that Tucker, who's trending in the right direction right now from a usage perspective, he has a chance for some bye-week fill-in production. The Bucs get the Bills this week too. Buffalo's been a top 5 matchup for running backs this year by adjusted fantasy points allowed. Sell Tez Johnson. Tez Johnson, who weighs as much as some middle schoolers, has 4 touchdowns over his last 4 games. That's resulted in 14.2 PPR points per game over the last month. Clearly, though, it's going to be really difficult for Tez Johnson to maintain that kind of touchdown production, especially because he only had an 11% target share in week 10. Not only that, but Tampa Bay's rest of season schedule for wide receivers, it looks okay on paper at first glance, but they face some teams like New Orleans and Carolina. They face some teams that, partially due to volume, they're not great matchups for wide receivers, at least according to adjusted fantasy points allowed. Of their remaining opponents, just 29% of them rank as top half favorable matchups by adjusted points allowed. Now look, I'm not sure if you can really sell high with Tez Johnson. Just know that he is outplaying his expected fantasy points total by about 4 or 5 PPR points per game right now. Add Joe Burrow. There was some unexpected news out of Cincinnati on Monday. Joe Burrow's 21-day practice window, it was opened. Now look, I know Burrow right now, he's rostered in almost 60% of Yahoo leagues. Chances are, someone in your league just threw him on IR. But not all leagues have an IR spot. There are going to be people out there listening to this show where Joe Burrow is sitting on the waiver wire. And if he is, I think you should get him this week. You may not be able to trust him right away, but Cincinnati quarterbacks have a good rest of season schedule. They only have one matchup against a bottom 10 opponent, which is Buffalo in week 14. So he's worth a bench spot right now, especially if you're struggling at quarterback. Buy Jordan Addison. If you're looking for like a smaller deal to make this week, it could be to buy Jordan Addison, to trade for him. Now, am I super enthusiastic about the way this Vikings passing attack looks? No, not really. But I do think it's rational to take a step back and remember that J.J. McCarthy has only started 4 NFL games. Addison has dipped below a 17% target share just once this year. And in week 10, he saw a 27% share. Now, he couldn't connect on his 12 targets. He only had 3 catches. But it's nearly impossible for a professional wide receiver, a wide receiver in the NFL, to sustain that low of a catch rate. There's some potential for this Minnesota passing attack to post better numbers moving forward. Upcoming for them is a game against the Bears. They've allowed about 27 passing yards over expected per game this year. Then it's the Packers, who are closer to average, and that's pre-Monday Night Football numbers. Then they get the Seahawks, who are plus 13 yards, the Commanders, who are plus 29 yards per game, the Cowboys, who are plus 57 yards per game, the Giants, who are plus 10 yards per game, and then the Lions, who are minus 8 yards per game. Minnesota wide receivers, according to my numbers, they have a top 3 rest of season schedule. Look, you should not send a starter to get Jordan Addison. That's not what I'm saying. But if you can get him to sit on your bench, if you can trade a bench asset to get Addison, I think he's a good upside player to have sitting there. Add Dalton Schultz. Now, I'll be honest, what Dalton Schultz is doing does not feel super sustainable. But he's been a top 7 tight end in weekly PPR scoring in 3 of his last 4 games. He's seen a target share of at least 20% in each of those contests. Now look, the Texans have had a favorable tight end schedule during this stretch. And their rest of season schedule, it's actually bottom 5 in the league. But this kind of usage deserves a shout out. Schultz has been a sleeper show call out this year, but let's throw him on the transactions list this week too. Add Dawson Knox. I've talked about so many different tight ends over the last handful of weeks on this show, whether it's Colston Loveland or whether it's Theo Johnson. I don't want to talk about the same guys over and over again. So let's give you a little bit of variety. Let's talk about Dawson Knox, who's going to be stepping in for Dalton Kincaid, because Dalton Kincaid right now is week to week with a hamstring injury. Now, back in week 6, when Kincaid was sidelined, Knox finished the day with a really solid 77% route share. Now, you might be sitting there and you're like, but he only had an 8% target share, and that's true. But he also faced Atlanta. Atlanta's been a team that's really limited tight end production this year. So with no reliable targets in that Buffalo offense, I think Dawson Knox could give you some usability here, at least while Dalton Kincaid is sidelined. Hold TreVeyon Henderson. What a wild year that it's been for TreVeyon Henderson. Turns out he might not be that bad, which is great. It makes me look a lot less stupid after seeing him perform against the Buccaneers. But I've gotten a lot of questions about Henderson after that performance, so let's talk about him. He had a breakout game against the Bucs. His target share did dip to 3.4%, but his route participation rate week over week was basically the same. So that's just some variance at play. What we did see is that he had about a 74% running back rush share. Now, part of that was because Terrell Jennings got hurt, but also Henderson took advantage. He ran the ball 14 times for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns. Everyone got to see his big play ability. Now, after everything we've seen this year, you might be tempted to sell. And honestly, it's not a bad thought, because there's a very real chance that when Ramondre Stevenson is back, that he comes in and he takes a pretty big workload in that backfield. But there's also a chance that Stevenson misses another game this week because the Patriots play on Thursday night. And they face the Jets, which on paper should be a good matchup for Henderson. Then after that game against the Jets, they get matchups against the Bengals and the Giants before their Week 14 bye. Those are quite literally the two best opponents for running backs by adjusted fantasy points allowed. After the bye, New England gets Buffalo. They're currently the 5th best opponent for running backs by adjusted fantasy points allowed. And then they're going to finish the season against the Ravens, who are playing better, but they're the 6th best opponent, and then the Jets again. Aside from their bye, Patriot running backs have the best schedule in all of fantasy football. Now look, like I said, I'd anticipate Ramondre Stevenson coming back at some point and seeing a pretty good workload. I just don't think it's going to be as big as it was before. That means Henderson could just play a role in this offense and play a role that I thought he was going to play at the start of the season, where maybe he sees half of the team's running back rushes and maybe a little bit more, who knows? And then he sees a decent amount of targets, or at least he's used in that way as the team's pass catcher. And now we know he has that big playability. We actually have seen it. It's not just something that he did in college or in the preseason. He's done it in an NFL game. As a result, he could be really efficient given these matchups down the stretch. So rather than thinking that he's an automatic sell, I would just be holding. I think buying, it's probably a little bit aggressive given how obnoxious that coaching staff has been with his backfield this year. But honestly, guys, I think Henderson and Stevenson could finish the 2025 season pretty well. Add Keaton Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell continues to be very, very fast. There are 8 players, according to Next Gen Stats, who have had 3 or more runs this year where they hit 20 miles an hour or more. Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Breece Hall, those are 6 of them. No real surprises there. Each one of those running backs, for the record, has at least 128 rush attempts. Another player on that list, and this is really surprising, it's Caleb Williams, and he only has 48 rush attempts. The 8th player on this list, Keaton Mitchell. He's had 3 runs of 20 miles an hour or more on only 15 rush attempts. Mitchell's seen 4 rushes in each of his last 3 games. His running back rush shares, they've consistently only been like the 16% range. There's nothing amazing going on the usage front. But on Monday, John Harbaugh noted that the Ravens want to get Mitchell more involved. Who knows what that means? I certainly have no idea because they have Derrick Henry. What we do know is that Keaton Mitchell is an efficiency machine and he can break big plays. And he's one Derrick Henry injury away from seeing more work in that backfield. Now, he wouldn't be a bell cow, but he would see more work if Derrick Henry went down. To me, in deeper leagues, that's worth a roster stash. Add the Atlanta Falcons defense. The Falcons are at home this week. They're 3.5-point favorites against the Panthers. Carolina, they're the 5th best opponent for opposing defenses by adjusted points allowed. Now, I do have a couple of fears here. Number 1, the Falcons are traveling a pretty long way to get back home. Number 2, the Panthers might be able to run the ball on the Falcons. That could limit defensive scoring opportunities for fantasy purposes. But overall, it's a pretty tough week for streaming defenses. So we're going to ride with Atlanta as a higher floor option. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you've yet subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Late Round QB. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll be back in your ears tomorrow with the weekly 10 Trends episode.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
Wishing the holidays could come early? If you own or manage a business, they can. With help from iHeartRadio. People are already shopping for their loved ones and hunting for deals wherever they can find them, including right here. They're listening to the radio. They're listening to podcasts. They could be listening to you. Don't wait for everyone else to kick off the holidays. Get your best season of the year up and running today. Call 844-844-iHeart or visit iHeartAdvertising.com.